Hey guys, it's Will. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing well. If you're new to the channel, thanks for finding us. I hope you dig this video. It's October. It's one of my favorite times of year because I get to watch a bunch of horror movies. And now that I have this new channel, I can talk to you about all these horror movies. I'm a really big fan of slasher movies. I love John Carpenter and I love the classic slasher 80s series, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween. And so in this video, I will be ranking all of the Halloween films. Let me give you a little bit of background. Before this calendar year, 2023, I had seen 4 Halloween films. I'd seen the first one probably 4 times. I'd seen the second one, I think, once or twice. Third one, I had seen 3 or 4 times. I love that movie. I got the Shout Factory Blu-ray a couple years ago. I've been watching it every year for Halloween for like the past 3 or 4 years. It's such an incredible film. And then, and I mean, the first one is like one of the best movies. I'm going to rank them. Let's not get into it. You can hear about the, And then I saw the 5th one, like totally randomly when I was a kid. I don't know why, but I did at some point. And I didn't know that until I rewatched it this year. And I was like, I've seen this movie before. Like I really remembered it. Anyway, point being, for Christmas of 2022, so last year, my brother-in-law gave me Halloween's 6, 7, and 8, the Shout Factory Blu-ray 4K set as a present. I was like, oh crap, this is like the perfect time for me to watch all the Halloween movies because I've only seen a couple of them before. So I went and bought 4 and 5 on Amazon. So I have, I own like all the first 8. And then if I finished those and I started watching all the other ones. So I thought, since it's Halloween, since it's October, since I have this new channel where I get to do fun stuff like ranking movies, I'm going to do my ranking of the Halloween films, having watched them all within the past, well, since January, 10 months. So let's dig into it. I should also say this is a thankless task. Everyone has different opinions. There are definitely things on here that I think are going to irritate people, and people will really disagree with me. But it's all in good fun. This is not meant to be definitive. I'm not saying these are the best ones. I'm saying for me personally, this is how I rank them based on my personal taste. It's all very subjective. So at number 13 of these movies, I have H2O, which I know will probably really irritate some people because I know that some people really love this film. This is the one that came out in 1998, so it's 20th year anniversary, which is why it's called H2O, Halloween 20. And Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, Josh Hartnett, Michelle Williams. The cast is freaking fantastic. Kevin Williamson was one of the screenwriters who wrote Scream and is one of the great horror screenwriters of the 90s and into the 2000s. There are a lot of so I should also say there's not a single movie on this list I don't like. I really, really did like all of these movies, and I will try to explain to you why. Why do I put this one at the bottom? There is some really good stuff in this movie. It's interesting that 20 years later, they've essentially erased the events of all the other films, and we're just talking about like kind of the first one, and she's an alcoholic, and she's got a son. She's moved out to California. She's like, and she's the principal of this private school, and she's like dating this guy, and like, it's very much like a caricature piece for a lot of the movie. It doesn't have a ton of characters. It's really like, it's Josh Hartnett is her son. It's her boyfriend. Michelle Williams is Josh Hartnett's girlfriend, and really kind of 2 other kids. And then LL Cool J is playing the security guard at the campus of the school, who also gets involved in the plot of the film. But here's the thing that why I didn't love this movie. I think maybe why some people really do actually love this movie, but kind of was awkward for me while watching it. This movie came out after Scream, and in that wave of post-Scream, late 90s, kind of very self-aware meta slasher movies, right? And those movies were heavily inspired by Halloween. And so it's almost like this circle of like Halloween inspired these movies. And then because these movies are having this really successful moment, it's come back to let's do another Halloween, but it feels like it's following the movies that followed it. It feels like it doesn't have an identity as a Halloween movie. It doesn't have the vibes, and to me, the Halloween series is the vibiest horror series of all time, and that's one of the things I love so much about it. And I think a lot of that is down to John Carpenter's template for the original films, especially the first 3, the ones that he was like heavily involved in as producer and stuff like that. Obviously director on the first one, writer on the first 2, and the vibes are not there. Like, it doesn't feel like a Halloween movie. It feels like a 90s slasher movie that's trying to be like I Know What You Did Last Summer type of movie. So it's like the Halloween series has come so full circle that it's trying to be the movies that are trying to be it. And it was just weird. And something about that didn't quite work for me, even though I really enjoyed watching the film. I'm not trying to insult it, but that aspect of it was odd to me. So at number 12 on my list of my Halloween ranking, I guess I should say, of all the Halloween films, I have Halloween Resurrection. This is the one that came out right after H2O, that has Buster Rhymes doing kung fu and electrocuting Michael Myers on the deck. And in many ways, this is a much worse film than H2O, but I actually enjoyed it more because this movie knows exactly what it is. It is a stupid movie that's very late 90s, early 2000s, that's like playing on reality TV and MTV and whatever, and putting a bunch of people in one place, and Michael Myers shows up and he just goes ham, and there's like stupid characters, there's sex, there's nudity, it's goofy, it's very self-aware. It's not a particularly good movie, but it knows that it's not like this revolutionary, fantastic movie. Because of that, I liked it. It's almost like a Jason movie, like a Friday the 13th movie, where you have like horny young people, some of whom are very likable and smart, some of whom are just really dumb and goofy and terrible, and they're in a place and someone shows up and starts killing them all. And it's just very satisfying in this kind of primal, silly, like B-tier slasher movie way, and I just enjoyed it for that. So at number 11 on my ranking of the Halloween films, I have Halloween 2018, which again is probably kind of low for a lot of people because I know a lot of people really loved this movie. This is the first of the new trilogy that was like the David Gordon Green, David, is that his name? And Danny McBride were like the producers, writers of these films. There were elements to this movie that I did really like. It's very stylish. It looks really good. I thought the script was kind of clumsy. There were elements to it that I really did enjoy. The podcasting thing was funny. Like, I get what they were doing with that. So if you're unfamiliar with the film, like, the setup is that these podcasters have come to like try to interview Michael Myers and do an episode about, you know, Haddonfield and everything that happened there, you know, whatever, 25, 30, it was 30 years ago at that point. And I like what they're doing with this kind of thing of like young people who are doing podcasts and doing YouTube and social media, TikTok and whatever, who think they're like uncovering things and being these great detectives, but really it's like they're just dragging up people's trauma to make their own careers and to make a name for themselves. And they don't really understand the historical, social meaning of these things. It's all just abstract information that they latch onto. And like, I get what they're doing. I feel like the setup was kind of clumsy. There were elements to this film that I did really like and elements that didn't quite. Like, it has this kind of like overly aestheticized thing in the beginning where it's like almost like grindhouse movie Kubrick, and like it didn't quite settle into an identity for me. It felt like it was all kind of all these different things happening at once, and because the script was a little bit clumsy, it wasn't kind of coalescing into a film that had a singular drive and identity. Which is not to say it's a bad movie. Like I said, I enjoyed every movie on this list. So that was Halloween 2018. To continue at number 10 on my ranking of the Halloween series, I have Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, which is Halloween 6. This is a movie I think a lot of people really don't like. If I'm understanding people's relationship with the Halloween series correctly, Paul Rudd is in this film, and it's the one that has like the satanic cult elements, which links Michael Myers to like supernatural stuff. I enjoyed this movie. I liked the fact that they decided to be really bold and do something really different and weird, but to not throw everything out the window, right? Like, so if you look at the Friday the 13th series, and in Friday the 13th Part 5, which I think is called The New Blood, they tried to do something really different, but they threw everything out the window, and it doesn't work because you're like, what is the connection here to anything, right? In this movie, they're trying to do something different, but they're holding on to core important elements. And I think it's an interesting experiment. I think it's relatively successful. I like the ambiance of it a lot. I liked like the weird, creepy, occult, like satanic worship, druid, whatever they're doing kind of thing in this movie. And it was just like, I went into this movie, I should also say, like 4, 5, and 6, I went into them with really low expectations because everyone seems to not like them that much. And I thought they were like really solid slasher movies of that era. And I thought this movie was a success in terms of, let's try something radically different, but it kind of works. And so I don't know, I didn't hate it. It didn't bother me. That's number 10. At number 9 on my ranking of the Halloween films. I have Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Again, there were elements to this movie I really enjoyed. I liked the protagonist quite a bit, and I thought there were some really good scenes, some good kills. I like the way that they bring the little girl character into it, and then she has continuity into the next film. I thought that was an interesting way to look at that, and kind of what's interesting to me about the Halloween series is it took a really long time, and I might even argue it never really found a specific identity. With the Friday the 13th films, from the second film onward, it's like this is what a Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees movie is, and it will always be this. And there are some variation, but it has a really strong identity as a franchise. Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, with the third one, Dream Warriors, which is an incredible movie, was like, this is the identity of the series as we move on from the first one. And there are some hiccups, but it got a clear notion of what it was. I feel like the Halloween series was just kind of like you had the first one, and then we're like, okay, we're going to franchise it. And then you have the second one, and then the third one obviously is completely different. And then with these ones coming back, like the 4, 5, and 6 almost feel more like Jason movies. And then you get into the meta slasher era of the post-Scream movies, and you're like, well, what is Halloween now? And like, it has this kind of nebulous identity, and the thing that links the movies ultimately that really gives it its identity is the Strode family and the Haddonfield as a location, the vibes, John Carpenter vibes, and Michael Myers killing people. Like, that's what links them together in like a meaningful way. Other than that, what is the identity of the series? And so I thought this movie it did some interesting things, and it is very much kind of like a Friday the 13th style slasher film, more so than it is in keeping with the first two Halloweens, but I enjoyed it, and I thought it was fun for what it was. So now we get to number 8. So the next, I would say, 3 movies on this list were really hard for me to put in order. I didn't know exactly where to put what. At number 8, I have Halloween 2, the Rob Zombie version. There are things about this movie I freaking love. Now, this comes down to personal taste. I love full-blown, weird, psychedelic, just batshit Rob Zombie. Lords of Salem is probably my favorite movie of his. I also love The Munsters. So I know that that's atypical. I know a lot of people would say probably Devil's Rejects or House of a Thousand Corpses, whatever their favorite Rob Zombie movies. I like it when he goes full batshit weird. And I really, really like the surrealism of Halloween 2. I also really like the way that it follows the character from the first film into the trauma of what she's experiencing after those events happened. It's like surprisingly grounded and realistic for a Rob Zombie film and for a slasher film in general to be looking at that and the continuity of trauma and what's happened to her in her life. I had a really difficult time with the characterization of Dr. Loomis in this movie versus how he was characterized in the first Rob Zombie movie. It's like, this is not even the same character. And Rob Zombie has spoken in interviews about he based that character on like a real person, and he was trying to do like something different. And like, I get it, but it just like, it did not work for me at all. And there were other elements of the second Rob Zombie Halloween film that I just couldn't get behind. So some of it I really, really loved. And some of it I was like, yeah, this is like not really working for me. So I didn't really know where to put it. So I put it at number 8. At number 7 on my ranking of the Halloween series, I have Halloween, wait, hold on. Halloween Kills? I wrote the wrong title down. I think it's Halloween Kills. Is that the second one of the new series? That's what I'm talking about. I wrote the title down wrong. I think it's Halloween Kills, right? It's the one where the townsfolk get back together and they, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film, they decide to try to hunt down Michael Myers because they experienced trauma as children as a result of his actions. I really liked this movie. It has Mondo Halloween vibes, like pure classic Carpenter Halloween vibes with the soundtrack and like, or I should say the score and just the look of it and stuff like that. Some people bristled at this movie because I thought it was stupid that like people were going after Jason. Like, I really like that it opens by going back to the night of the original film and shows you different dramas of like just like random people on the street and stuff like that, or like peripheral characters or whatever. And then it brings you forward 30 years and looks at what happened to their lives and how they react to the reappearance of Michael Myers. What I really liked about the new trilogy is that in a lot of ways, I think it's this kind of meta commentary on horror films and horror series and slasher movies and the way that they recycle ideas and keep recurring and trying to realistically deal with that while also commenting upon the nature of the films and how, like, if you look at the first film, it feels very kind of 70s. If you look at the second film, there's a lot of 80s slasher elements to it. If you look at the third film, has this kind of 90s feel to it, right? So it's like it's looking at the decades of these films and stuff. Like, it's a very interesting series. But I really enjoyed the second one. I thought it was really well done. It's a pretty violent movie. The kills are very satisfying, and I think it's a really fascinating film for what it looks at thematically. At number 6 on my ranking of the Halloween series, I have Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers. This one really felt like a pure Friday the 13th movie to me. So, and I'm a huge fan of the Friday the 13th series. So this is just like pure joy slasher movie murdering people. Like, I just really like this movie. I thought it had some really good sequences. The girl from Halloween 4 is back, and we're kind of following her story again a little bit. And we have these kind of young adult characters, and they're going out to this party. It's a Halloween party. Everyone's dressed up. There's sex. There's drinking. There's a scene in a barn, which is a prominent thing in the Friday the 13th movies, obviously, because they take place kind of like in a rural area. You get some pretty classic scenes from barns in those films, and it just felt like a Jason movie. Like, it really straight up felt like a Jason movie with the characters from Halloween in it. And I really liked it because of that, because I love Jason movies. So that was number 6. At number 5 on my ranking of the Halloween. Now we're getting into the top 5. So these are like the ones I really loved. And maybe this is going to make people bristle. I don't know. I have Halloween Ends. I loved this movie, and I really did not expect to, because a lot of people told me it totally sucked. So I went into it with zero expectations, and I loved this movie. I thought it was so interesting. To me, more than the other two in the new trilogy, this movie really looks at trauma within a town, the notion of evil, the idea of like a cloud of evil and violence and trauma, and like this notion of like people feeling as though they're cursed, but also looking at like the way the media reacts to violence, the fetishization of violence, that taking the terror out of it and making it this kind of like attractive thing in this weird fucked up way, and the way that affects young people, people who have been through trauma, people with mental illness problems. And also the way in which these films keep respawning and reinventing ideas and taking evil and turning it into evil, but turning evil attractive, and and films as catharsis, and like notions of social catharsis, and it's just such an interesting movie, but also really enjoyable. It's basically a drama for like the first 45 minutes or an hour about these young people experiencing a lot of trauma, who are outcast, who are bullied. It looks at the bullying and the effects of bullying in this film. And like, I just thought it was a fascinating movie with really great characters, with really satisfying violence in it, that did a really interesting thing with the series, that was willing to be bold, and it was really successful in the boldness of his vision, I feel. And I was really surprised by how much I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic. It was a fantastic meta slasher film. It was a fantastic meta look at the Halloween series and slasher movies in general. There was also a really fascinating look at a lot of the themes of the Halloween films, of like social trauma, violence, and the way that the media and people interact with those things. So at number 4 on my ranking of Halloween films, maybe a controversial choice this high on the list, I have the Rob Zombie Halloween film. I'm a Rob Zombie fan. It should be noted. I came to Rob Zombie through his music, through like White Zombie, and then his first solo record was huge when I was in high school. And so I've been a fan of Rob Zombie's music for, I mean, when did More Human Than Human? That was the first song of White Zombies that I loved. And that was what, like 96, 95? So like 28, 30 years. And then I got into his movies relatively recently, like within the last year. And I really like his Halloween movie. I think he just makes really great choices. I mean, the stuff with Loomis and Michael at the beginning, the way he expands that from the original and really looks at the psychology of it, and the doctor trying to work with him, and the failure to do so, and Michael being from this really fucked up family, and how that affects him. Like William Forsythe and Sherry Moon Zombie in this movie are they're freaking hysterical. They're such dirtbags to me. That's such like a Rob Zombie scene of just like these filthy trashy people. I thought it was really well done. The casting is great. I think the acting is great in these films. And I just like the trajectory of it. I mean, the violence is obviously very satisfying, and the scuzziness of it, but the things that he focuses on and expands from the previous versions of the film, I thought were really great creative decisions. I thought it was an amazing creative decision to make Michael Myers freaking huge. physically huge, because then you don't have to get into supernatural kind of stuff to explain why he is able to do what he can do and survive what he can survive. He's just this freaking monster, and it makes sense. So I loved it, and I thought it was a really interesting take. I thought he did a really good job of honoring the original while not being afraid to do his own thing with it. And I loved it. So at number 3, we're into the top 3 now. These are like the best of the best. At number 3, I have Halloween 2. This movie's freaking fantastic, and there's a lot of things about it that are freaking fantastic. I thought it was a really interesting and bold decision to be like, fuck it, let's just start immediately when the first one ends and see what happens. And it all takes place in one night, a lot like the first one. Because of that, it has a lot of energy to it. It has a lot of uncertainty to it, because it's really destabilizing to be like, we think Michael Myers is dead. He's not. We have to deal with all of the chaos from the first film while dealing with the chaotic uncertainty of not knowing where Michael Myers is and what his motive is and what he's going to do. You have amazing visual design in this film. The blocking, the camera work, the steady cam work in this movie is freaking amazing. And just the visual design of it in general, and it gives it this chaotic, uncertain, decentralized energy where you're not really sure what's gonna happen. And again, like, great characters in this movie. There's some very funny stuff in this movie, like the ambulance like there's the two ambulance dudes, the young one and the older one. The older one is freaking hysterical, I think, and very silly. They're having fun with this movie. There's some goofiness to it. There's some awareness of the fact that it's just capitalizing on the success of the original, but also while trying to pay homage to the original to keep the spirit of it alive. I love the music in this movie. I think it's better than the music in the original. John Carpenter is such an incredible composer, and his work with synthesizers and soundscapes, and like, this is just a phenomenal film. And I rewatched it like a couple days ago, so I'm like really excited about it. But I loved it, and it's a really incredible sequel, I think. So that brings us into the top 2, and you know what they are if you know the series and you've been paying attention. So what am I going to put at 2, and what am I going to put at number 1? At number 2, I have the OG Halloween 1978. I mean, this movie is so influential that it took me, like, I'm not kidding you, I think like it was the 3rd or 4th, I think I've seen it 5 times now, maybe 6. It was the 3rd or 4th time I watched it that I was able to actually see it as its own movie, and not just as this cultural landmark that influenced so many horror films that you can't even see the forest through the trees. Like, the first several times I saw it, I couldn't look at it as itself. And then when I was finally able to do that, I was like, this is a really, really good movie. It's a really unique film. It's a slasher film. It's a violent movie, but the emphasis is not on violence. Like, well, I've been watching the Friday the 13th movies again this year for Halloween, and those movies really emphasize the kills and the brutality and the violence. The first Halloween movie and the second one really emphasized the tone, the mood, and the dread and the creepiness of it, and this sense of the inevitability of terror and violence. And I think that's the unique identity that carries throughout this series in a way, while it struggles to find identity in a lot of ways. And like, it gets more focused on gruesome killing in the way that the Jason movies are when it comes back, and with like Halloween 4, 5, and 6 and stuff like that. But I think that if there is continuity to this series, it's the vibes, as I've said before in this video. And it's this sense of dread and the inevitability of brutality. And this film does that so well, and the characters are just really real, and they're so good, and they're so likable, and you really don't want them to die, and it spends so much time setting them up that you hate it when they do die. And I think the first like 4 Jason movies did a really good job of that too, and I think that's something that horror movies have kind of lost, is the ability to set the characters up in a meaningful way that you care about them. Halloween is like, I would say at least half, maybe 60 to 70% character drama, much like the first 2 Friday the 13th movies. So it hits you, and it hurts, and it means something when they die. And I mean, and it's one of the most influential movies of like the past 50 years, indisputably. So it's a classic, but setting aside the fact that it's a classic, when you really see it for what it is, it's a freaking awesome movie. So now my very, very controversial choice at number 1, because it's the movie that has nothing to do with the rest of the movies in this series, it's Season of the Witch, Halloween 3. This is like a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It's probably my favorite John Carpenter score. The vibes are immaculate. I love the fucking weirdness of it. I love that it's like definitely an 80s slasher horror movie, but it's also like this like gonzo ass, like old school, almost like 50s style sci-fi movie that's also a mystery. And Tom Atkins is freaking fantastic in the lead. And I really love the cast in this movie. I love the way that the plot moves. I think, like the first two movies, this movie gives a really tremendous sense of like small town America in that time in the early 80s. And it's a very grounded film, very rooted in character. I love the setup of it and the plot and the mysteries that are uncovered. It's just batshit insane. It's like a perfect movie for me. I like movies that are really weird and keep getting weirder, and they're kind of batshit insane and kind of ludicrous and like very pulpy, but also very well made, and like in a way kind of creepy and menacing and subdued, but in another way totally ludicrous and over the top. And like this is just like a perfect movie for me, and I love it so much. And my love for this movie is what really inspired me to want to be like, okay, I need to just watch the whole series because I've seen the first one several times. It's a classic. I enjoyed the second one. I love the third one. I need to do it. So it's number one for me. And I know that there are other people who love this movie as much as, if not more so than I do. But I also know that it's kind of like a cult thing. And like a lot of people are like, what is this fucking movie even doing in this series? Let's get back to Michael. So there you go. So there's my ranking of the Halloween series. My name is Will. I hope you enjoyed this video. I thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.